Due to my profession, I come across the dead, and anything related more often than your average Joe. In the past 8 years, I've been working as a funeral director here in Germany, and me and my colleagues have experienced numerous unexplainable things that have stuck with us. Out of these, I would like to share one with you today that was as clear as day, and surely not my imagination. The story begins at the end of a pickup in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. We had just finished rolling the casket into the cooling unit, and we were sitting by the desk around the corner, filling in our nighttime sheets. You need to know that our hygienic area and the makeshift office are separated by our cache of caskets, waiting to be put to use. The light there is always off, so all the lighting you get is the faint shimmer of cold white light coming from the hygienic area. I looked to my left as I finished writing my timesheet and was startled to see a dark figure standing right on the walkway between the caskets, illuminated from the back by the mentioned light. I slowly poked my colleague to look. He also saw the figure, and after a few seconds of blank staring, I called out thinking that it was one of our other colleagues, maybe. No answer. So I called out a second time. Yet again, nothing. Since we had intruders in the funeral home before, both of us got up and slowly walked towards the figure, further calling out to it. About halfway towards the figure, it suddenly turned away and audibly walked out of sight towards the cooling unit. My colleague and I quickly followed, but as we got around the corner, nothing was there. The big back door was still locked, and the only window was barred up and cluttered with stuff anyways. Out of fear of an actual intruder, we looked around, searching anywhere but gave up eventually. Both of us are sure that we saw a ghost that night, since it was too clear to be some strange shadow. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that because we're still looking for some explanation. Second post. Since so many of you requested it, and I've got some time on my hands, I decided to give you more insight into my experiences and thoughts on ghosts, shadow figures, etc. This time I would like to address strange occurrences around the funeral home, the crematory, and other places connected to my job. Death often strikes fast and unexpected, possibly leaving numberless spirits wandering around not knowing what happened to them. These, as it seems, follow their body around, leaving them in places that the body passes on its way to the grave. Normally, they don't appear to us as full-body spirits or shadow figures or whatnot. They mainly just mess around with stuff and make noises. Such as one that recently started throwing personal data sheets, each and every one of the deceased gets one, off of the door of the big cooling unit every time someone new gets into the unit. We push them in, close the door, add the sheet, and once we've left, one or two of the sheets will all of a sudden fly off the door. We've already adjusted to this by going away, waiting 1 or 2 minutes, and then coming back. I'd like to have footage of that, but I don't have cameras to put up there. Another thing is that you'll hear voices sometimes. The most extreme example of that must have been my colleague running out of the office, claiming that somebody screamed at him. Voices are so common that we generally try to ignore them. It's unintelligible in most of the cases, and if we understand things, we usually can't make any sense of it. I personally talk to every single body that I prepare, stating what I'm going to do and what I'm doing just in case someone is listening. Little things go missing all the time, too. Tools, pens, candles, and many other small objects. They're often gone for about a month until we find them again in the most impossible places. A key went missing once, and we later found it under a metal cupboard in our hygienic area. Odd thing was, when it went missing, it was hanging in its destined place on a holder in the office. This could as well be a colleague, but none of us gains anything from hiding stuff that we need constantly. We also have the occasional slamming/opening of doors, drawers, shelves, and even empty caskets. The last one happened to me while I was alone. I noticed a strange wooden banging sound and something similar to creaking floorboards. I went to check it out, and I found a casket, which was ready to be used and on the ground, slowly pulling one corner of its lid up for about half an inch, and slipping back down, causing the banging. I watched it for a couple of bangs, and I got so fed up with it that I just decided to grab the lid and push it shut. It stopped after that. So, these are some of the random encounters that could be of paranormal origin that I've had over the past few years. Again, I'm looking for answers or explanations, and would be happy to hear your thoughts. I'll share more in future posts since these things are not at all rare occurrences. I'll also try to get a hold of some evidence so you can better understand what me and my colleagues are dealing with. I have a few stories. The first is mine, the second is shared between my family, but mainly my niece. 1. My family has always told me that when I was a toddler, I would stand at the window and speak up to the tree outside. And when they asked who I was talking to, I would say, "Papa," which is what everyone called my dad's father, who died of cancer long before I was born. So I never even met him. They never really felt anything bad about it because everyone loved him, and I would laugh and giggle and just talk away for apparently hours. And 2, we were 4 when this happened, but my sisters are older, so they remember more and have told me countless times. After my parents divorced in 2004, my mom and 2 sisters, M and AI, moved to a duplex next to my sister A, her boyfriend D, and her daughter E, who was born a month before I was. While we lived there, E developed an imaginary friend named Justina, who told her to do sinister things, and also did some sinister things in the house. Justina apparently looked like E, and was the same age as her when she died. She told E that her and her parents were in a car accident on the road that we lived on, and later on we found out that there was actually an accident near our house where a family of 3 died. Anyways, she would tell E to turn on the gas burners on the stove and touch them, and if she didn't, she would harm E's family, which apparently she was capable of doing because while they were moving in, she threw a dime at A's head because she had reprimanded E earlier. This was a common occurrence. If someone yelled at or spanked E and then was there alone, something weird would happen to them. M was babysitting E, and E was doing the usual bad child behavior and got spanked for swearing at M and then was sent to bed. Later on, M was reading a book for her high school class and saw E come out of her room in the corner of her eye and start spinning on the computer chair, something we did all the time. When she got to the end of her paragraph, she went to yell at E to go back to bed, and the chair was empty and kept on spinning, even though no one was in it. No one was making it move. She was just speechless and then found E asleep in her bed. Another time, AI was babysitting E and refusing to go to bed. So, AI yelled at her and made her go to bed, crying like children do when they don't want to go to sleep. When AI went to sleep on the couch that night, she woke up and felt a weight on her chest, and she couldn't move or breathe. And when A and D walked in, it immediately stopped. After all this happened, they looked into it and found the article with pictures of the family, and Justina looked exactly like my niece. I don't remember anything happening, but I know I experienced some things because one time I was staying the night and Dee was messing with the living room TV with the remote from their bedroom TV, and I was so scared because I thought she was coming for me and I didn't know what to do. The paranormal has been a major part of my life for as long as I can remember. My first experience happened when I was just a couple of months old. Clearly, I don't remember it, but my dad does. And I had my first memorable experience when I was 6. Things seemed to follow me. Or maybe I just ended up in the right place at the right time. Whatever the case, I've had more experiences in 26 years than most people will have in their lifetime. A large chunk of those experiences happened at my dad's house. It's a tiny 5-room bungalow built in the late 30s or early 40s. Metal siding, a small attic, and an even smaller root cellar with an eerie crawl space. It sits on about half an acre of land in a small town that, quite frankly, has a strong foreboding vibe all its own. Beyond the backyard is a small cornfield. Beyond that are woods with small swamp running through it. The swamp has some stories of its own from what I remember. My dad bought this place when I was 15. I wasn't as excited about moving out of a rusted ancient trailer as I should have been. Dad had spent 2 or 3 years looking for an actual house for us. We must have looked at 40 houses at that time, some better and prettier than the bungalow. The first question he asked me the day that we started moving our stuff was, "What do you think? Is this place haunted?" I said, "I don't know, but something feels weird." I moved in with him full-time when I was 18, divorced parents and shared custody, and that was when things started to get spooky. 1, it wasn't long after Dad bought the place that things started happening, although he didn't tell me about them until I started experiencing them. I would often smell a smoky, floral perfume moving through the house. Sometimes it just smelled like roses. It never stayed in one spot. Dad said that he smelled it a lot, and sometimes it was so strong that it woke him up. 2, footsteps. Lots of them. 3, movement in the attic. There's only one way into the attic, a drop-down door above where my bed used to be. Some nights I would hear walking, stomping, and furniture being dragged up there. However, there was no proper floor up there. If you've ever watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and remember the attic scene, you'll know what I'm talking about. 4, I used to want to be a singer, so I would spend a lot of my time alone, which was most of the time, trying to build up my confidence and train my voice by singing loudly. One day I sang a song pretty damn well, and when I finished, I heard a hearty clapping coming from my bedroom. I just paused and said, "Thank you." Eventually, more advanced spooky things started happening. The first event that I remember was in the middle of a beautiful, bright day. I was folding laundry in my bedroom when I heard a large dog barking in the house. I went out to look, thinking one of my neighbor's pit bulls had gotten in. They had tried before because they think every house is theirs. Not logical now, but at the time that was my only thought. When I got out there was no dog. Nothing was out of place, except the dryer was open. I always closed it, because the open door blocked the back door too much. It was also hard to open and had to be slammed shut. The moment I saw the door was when the voices started. Male, female, young, old. They started as a collective whisper that came from every wall in the house and progressed to a mix of whispers, talking, yelling, screaming, and crying. The only place it didn't come from was my room, as I found out from running there and curling into the fetal position on my bed. I could hear them from behind my door, and soon it sounded like the voices had all congregated right there, trying to get to me, only to be stopped by a flimsy accordion door. I put my hands over my ears and cried. Eventually, I started praying and reciting Psalm 23. I wasn't even that religious at the time. After reciting the psalm, the voices stopped, and I went calm immediately before sleeping for an hour or so. After I woke up, I went to my friend's house down the road. Her mother hates me to this day and thinks that I'm a demon-possessed heathen. She didn't think too highly of the story that I had either. The second event involved the band. I've only seen it once. To get to the bathroom, you have to go through my dad's bedroom. His bed is right beside the door, and he has under-the-knees storage drawers. One day I walked in there and saw that one of the drawers was half open. He never kept the drawers open. As I walked past, a pale gray, long, emaciated arm shot through the drawer and tried to grab me with spindly fingers. I instinctively jumped over it and went to the bathroom like I'd seen nothing. I figured it was better not to let whatever that was know that I was afraid. A couple of days later, I was telling my dad about the arm. I went into his room, which is next to the dining room, and tried to sort of recreate the event. Dad has a corner curio cabinet with a mirrored back in his room. I stood near the bed and looked over at the curio cabinet, and I saw a woman standing behind me. She was white. Not Caucasian white, just pure snow white. Her skin, hair, eyes, even her dress, all one even tone. Her hair was up in an antique bun style, and her dress looked to be a plain style dress from the late 1800s. While I tried not to let the hand even scare me, this woman drove me over the line. I screamed and started crying. This was my second or third time seeing a full-body apparition, but it was the first time that I'd ever been so frightened by one. Dad came in, and obviously no one was there. Seeing her was what really started the worst of it. She would end up being a major player in all of this. Sometime between the first time meeting her and the most horrifying event involving her, I got a dog. Her name is Ferris, and she's my baby. She had a hard time adjusting, so I spent a lot of time at night with her by my side as I watched movies by myself. Dad worked long hours and was often in bed by 8, so I always closed the French doors between the living room and dining room to keep the noise down. A few days after adopting Ferris, I noticed that she would look over to the doors and growl. I ignored it for a week or so, chalked it up to her adjusting, and then one night I looked over and really wished that I hadn't. On the other side of the doors were hands pressed firmly against the lower panes of glass, and figures low to the ground, moving in a slithery, almost slimy way. I couldn't make out the detail, but somehow the images of decomposing bodies writhing in pain on the floor came to mind. Instead of freaking out, I turned up the TV volume and watched my movie, all while glancing over at the figures behind the door. They never left the entire time that I was out there. I'd see them a few times afterwards, but they did eventually go away. Ferris always let me know when they were there, and they also never left handprints. Then, There was Quasimodo. I don't know who or what he was, but I only had ever saw him in the reflection of a full wood and glass curio cabinet that my dad had sitting on top of the TV stand in the living room. He was mostly shadow, although I could make out certain details like the cut and color of his hair, his hunched back, and twisted arms. The first time I saw him, I looked over at the curio cabinet as I walked through the room and saw him walking closely behind me. It made me jump, but I didn't feel afraid like the white woman did. He didn't stick around long. I wish he could have taken her place. There was a time when our sump pump malfunctioned and the root cellar flooded. I was woken up by my dad yelling up from beneath the floors, "We got a problem down here!" I was a bit upset that he woke me up like that, as if he thought that I had some broke appliance spidey sense that should have woken me up hours ago just as the pump broke. I asked him later why he woke me up like that, and he said, "Woke you up? I heard you walking around upstairs before I even said anything." We both got chills from that one. Now, for the long story. The day of absolute hell. I hadn't slept well that night. I woke up around 4 a.m. I know this because I could hear my dad out in the kitchen making coffee before he went to work. I'd been woken up to the feeling of someone's entire hand covering my face, using their fingertips to grip tight. I laid still for a while and hoped that it was a dream. Sleep paralysis, maybe? But I could move. And when I looked up at the wall, I saw something so incredibly surreal. I used to have a beautiful handmade yarn shawl that I got at a thrift store. I kept it hung up on my wall because it was so beautifully made that I considered it a work of art. Popping out of the neck hole of the shawl was a human head. It was pale, gray, it had dark, almost childlike features, but there was something so menacing about it. I stared at the head for a long time. It stared back at me expressionless and only blinked a couple times. I eventually heard my dad leave, and I ran to turn on the light. I never broke eye contact with this head, and it never broke eye contact with me. Just like something out of a cheesy horror movie, the moment I turned on the light, the head was gone. I tried going back to sleep with the lights on, but I couldn't. I sat out in the living room and watched TV until about 7 a.m. About that time, I felt like my heart was being crushed from within my chest. I saw a pale, transparent figure standing in front of me with its hands to my chest. I recognized it as the white woman, and I tried to get up. Somehow, she held me down. I reached for my phone to call my mom, but for some reason the call wouldn't go through. Text did, though. I sent my mom a play-by-play of what was going on, and told her how scared I was, and that I thought this woman was trying to kill me. Of course she was. I used to have the screenshots of the text that I sent my mom, but they became lost after an old phone I kept them on died. Then, the white woman vanished just as I felt like I was going to pass out, or maybe die. I got out of my chair and ran outside. One of my neighbors was out at her car and about to go to work. She knew that we believed the house was haunted, but never judged us for it, so I ran to her and told her what was going on. She tried to calm me down and told me everything would be okay. She said to call her if anything else happened, and she would pick me up and take me back to work with her. I went back inside, and I immediately regretted it. I walked past my dad's room, and it gave me a terrible feeling. I peeked inside and saw the woman standing in the corner with her back towards me, her chest and shoulders heaving as if she was taking long, labored, but silent breaths. I didn't stick around. I grabbed my purse and keys and I ran back outside just before my neighbor was about to go to work. I frantically told her what I saw. If there was any doubt in her mind, it was gone now. She saw how stressed and terrified I was. She walked over to look at the house and then turned to look at me. Behind her, I saw the woman's face staring at me through the kitchen window. I shrieked, and I watched as the face quickly ducked back to my right. The direction she moved is illogical, since there's a cabinet, sink, and a wall there. Sometimes, I wonder if she left the house for a moment. My neighbor explained to her bosses and coworkers that I was with her because I had some home issues and needed to get out of there. I'm sure they all thought I was on drugs by looking at me. I was a sleep-deprived mess, dressed in mismatched clothes and slippers. At one point, I tried sleeping on a couch in the lobby. I couldn't sleep. I tried sleeping in the conference room and I couldn't sleep. I wandered the building for a while, and eventually made my way to an unused cubicle across from my neighbor's. The rest of that day is a blur. Things sort of calmed down after that. There were small experiences here and there, footsteps and smells. I moved out shortly after that for various reasons. I've only been back twice. Dad says those small things happen from time to time, but nothing big. My experiences in general have slowed down. Maybe it's because I'm not seeking anything out. Maybe it's the stress of the tangible world overshadowing anything that may try to show itself to me. Sometimes, I miss it. Most of the time, I look back at all the other worldly bullcrap that I've seen and think, nah, I'm good. I do have a lot more experiences outside of that house that I may write about. When I was around 12 or 13 years old, my mom moved my two sisters and I into a new house with her new boyfriend. The house was 2 streets away from our old house, so we moved in quickly. I'm going to try to explain the house, so bear with me. The staircase was in the center of the house, facing the backyard. If I'm standing with my back to the backyard, looking up the stairs, the living room is to my left, kitchen to the right. In between the living room and staircase is a hallway leading to the garage, with the bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room. There's a built-in shelf in the hallway. Between the staircase and the kitchen is a hallway leading to the front door with a front room and breakfast nook separated by a half wall. Upstairs to the left was the master bedroom with a bonus room/office. Upstairs to the right was mine and my sister's room, connected by a Jack and Jill bathroom. So, the house always had this feeling that I can't really explain. It just always felt off. The worst place to be was upstairs and in the front room/breakfast nook. Everything started very slowly. Spare change flying off the built-in shelf in the hallway, to hearing footsteps upstairs when you were in the living room. It seemed as if the only people affected by the weird noises and weird feelings were my mom, my middle sister, and myself. We decided one day to go through the attic-type space in the bonus room off of my parents' room. All we found up there were a bunch of white jeans. It looked to be True Religion jeans that were never finished. Now, I'm not sure if this is related at all, but after we found the jeans, everything went to hell. My mom's BFF lived down the street, so middle sister and I would watch her 3-year-old often. She was at our house, sitting in my sister's doorway, looking into my mom's dark room. She kept looking into my mom's room and eventually asked my sister and I, "Who's that guy in Auntie's room?" We went to her house after that. I couldn't walk through the hallways without a feeling of dread, like something wanted to hurt me. My sister and mom shared the same feelings. Mom's room ended up always being dark. No matter how many lights were on, the room was just never bright. We all had nightmares constantly, but my oldest sister and now stepdad never experienced any of it. Our dog would always stare from the kitchen into the front room and growl, and he never stepped foot in that room. He would not go upstairs either. One night, I'm at a sleepover and my middle sister is at home on her computer, about to go to bed. She's falling asleep when she feels someone crawl over her and lay down next to her. She thought it was me because she didn't know I was gone. I slept with her a lot because my room scared me. She woke up in the morning with a huge black and purple bruise on her leg. And when she found out that it wasn't me and I wasn't home, she lost it. We moved away shortly after that. For years, up until recently, I had a recurring dream about being back in that house. I would be standing, looking up the staircase, and just have a horrible feeling in my stomach that whatever it was wanted to hurt me. But I couldn't move. I would end up going up the stairs anyways, but then my dream would skip to me being in the front room. I could hear my middle sister crying for help, but I couldn't move. I would be back at the stairs, looking up, when I could feel something awful behind me. I'd wake up quickly, and it always felt like something terrible wanted my sister. It finally ended recently when I was having the same dream, but I was finally able to get to my sister upstairs, and we ran out of the house and shut the door. On the way out, though, there was the ghost of a sickly woman who looked as if her face was stuck in a scream. She chased us out of the house, but she didn't give me the bad feeling that I had before. It was like she was the one getting us out. Then, I never had that dream again. What follows occurred in 2005, when I was going through a very messy and painful, for me anyway, divorce. In looking back, I remember fighting so hard for so long to keep together a situation which was a lost cause for years. I set the stage this way to help you, the reader, understand that for months as this dragged on, I was not in a good place. At all. And so it was on a certain night, after another day of too many cigarettes and far too much dark anguish, that I laid there waiting to go to sleep. Sleep was difficult during this time for me, but at some point I did fall asleep, and at some point the following experience happened. I found myself standing in about a foot of fresh snow, which at the time I thought was really interesting since it was summer in the waking world. The dream was lucid, which is not rare for me, in that I remember looking behind me and that there were no footsteps in the snow. I didn't walk here. It was night, and based on the enormous tree line surrounding me that I could make out in the moonlight, I was in the middle of some vast forest. In front of me was a small cabin lit from the inside, with smoke trailing from the chimney. It was then that I started to feel cold, and so I walked up to it. I knocked on the door and was shocked when my father answered. He had died in 2000, and we were extremely close. I couldn't believe it, and for a few minutes it was hugs and tears, and somehow I had all these pictures of my daughters in my pocket all of a sudden. And so I was taking them out, showing him, telling him stories. He was patiently smiling, but I could tell that he was listening for my benefit. and it soon set in that he had seen every one of these moments of me and my kids. He'd seen everything. And I still hold on to this day that he watches over my girls, and now his new granddaughter. Something struck me as odd once I began to take this all in. My dad was not the rustic type. In fact, he hated camping. And looking around, I could see the place was filled with books, so that it made it comfortable, but this didn't really feel like his place, if you catch my drift. I must have mentioned that because I watched his face change into something a bit more somber, and he answered. It's because I don't really belong here. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I didn't understand what he meant, and he must have read it on my face, and he went on. I'm here for you, son. I came here to this place to help you, but we're running out of time. You're here because I have something to show you. In the next instant, we were back in the snow, behind the cabin. The moon was really bright. I remember because I could see pretty clearly. We were standing in front of this gigantic kennel, with a high fence all around it. I was confused. It was then that I could see two large shadows moving in the back. I began to hear the sounds that they were making, and I will never forget it. It was like a growl and a whine at the same time. I think they sensed who I was, or something, because they shot forward into the light, and I saw them for the first time. They were two huge black wolves, but so horrible looking. They were so enraged and at the same time so sick. Their hair was matted in filth, and gone altogether in sickly patches, with bloody spots where they had bitten themselves or each other. They were throwing themselves at the fence, almost blindly, to get at me. I remember they were biting at the fence until their mouths were bloodied. Once or twice they bumped into each other and they would immediately tangle in a bloody, violent fight. Dark blood fell on the snow. Somehow I knew that this must have been going on for a very long time. The whole scene was so frightening, so repulsive, and so confusing. Again, this sort of thing was so out of character for my dad, who loved animals. I asked him why he was doing this. Why was he keeping these things around? I remember my dad's face. So kind, but pained too, I could see. He said, "Son, don't you understand? This is what I'm here for. In the middle of nowhere, hidden away out here. I'm here to help you." He motioned to the kennel. "These two wolves are your anger and your fear, and they're tearing everything apart. I came here to keep them here, to keep you safe, but son, I can't hold them here any longer. You can't hold them here any longer. They will destroy everything. You aren't going to live much longer like this." I stood there in silence. Even the wolves had fallen silent, and I wanted to cry. All of it came into view. The beating myself up, the huge toll it was taking on me, my mental and physical health, all coming to the point where I was actually facing my own death. I knew that part to be true. I would be dead within days. All of it was because someone didn't love me, but what was actually doing the most damage, what was killing me, was that I refused to love myself. I could tell by my dad's face that he saw me coming to this realization, and he smiled in relief. "Are you ready?" he asked. I was terrified that they would attack me, but I knew there was no choice. With the whole world watching, it felt like I walked up with as much courage as I had and I flung open the gate. With that growling whine that was deafening, the wolves leapt out of the kennel, finally free. They stood there for a moment, locking eyes with me, their hair standing on end. For a second, I thought they were going to kill me. Payment for keeping them in a cage. And finally, without a look back, they charged together into the forest. Where they went, I don't know. I remember looking at my dad, not knowing what to do next. There were no words, just a feeling that the experience was over. I knew that this place would never be here again for me, but my father would, which was more than enough. And it was then when I woke up. It was early morning. I felt mentally and physically drained, somehow not the same. But there was also a knowing that the worst was behind me, that I was not going to die yet. The wolves were released. Day by day, I slept better. As the moving day approached, I found myself looking forward to a new life. My girls and I had the best adventures when we were together. Great memories that we talk about to this day. I owe much of that turning point to my dad, who put himself in a cabin in the middle of nowhere to keep me from tearing myself apart. About 10 minutes ago, my boyfriend, a non-believer, and I were sitting in our living room watching a YouTube video about the real Conjuring house. In the video, the new homeowners were talking about shadow people, and so I said to my boyfriend, I think I have a few experiences with shadow people. And literally just as I said it, a weird black flash went through our apartment. I saw something black move very quickly past my peripheral, and my boyfriend described it as like a camera flash going off in our apartment. We were both like, what the heck was that? He's trying to explain it away as some sort of light from outside, but we've lived here for years and never seen anything like that. This is not the first weird thing that has happened in this apartment. Our ceiling fan used to turn on by itself all the time, and it used to scare me so bad that I asked for it to please stop. And it's never happened again since asking it to stop. I always feel like there's someone in the bathroom with me while I'm showering, to the point that I have spoken out loud to my boyfriend thinking he's in there, only to move the shower curtain and see that he's not. There have been times I could have sworn that I heard someone opening the bathroom door while I'm in the shower, but sure enough, every time I look, no one is there. One morning I woke up to my boyfriend whispering to me, "It's time to get up." And I opened my eyes with a big smile on my face, only to see that he wasn't even home. The man who used to live here's name was Tom. Tom died in our kitchen, and we moved into the apartment 3 months later. Tom was actually a family friend of my boyfriend's family. Tom knew my boyfriend when he was a kid. It was actually a fluke that we ended up moving into this exact apartment. When we first moved in, we had no idea that Tom used to live here and died here, until we already signed the lease and met our neighbor, who happens to be Tom's son. We oftentimes hear weird banging noises coming from the kitchen, and we both say out loud, somewhat jokingly, "Oh, you stop it, Tom." And then the banging stops. My boyfriend claims to not believe in any of this stuff, but I sometimes do think that we have a spirit visitor. The incidents that I'm describing are very far and few in between. They're not enough to convince me that we have a consistent haunting. I also have no proof that there is a spirit that's actually Tom. The weird camera flash / black whoosh just happened 10 minutes ago, though, and we both saw it. So, I thought I would share. Hi, creepy Reddit. I have a story from about 2 years ago. that really captivates me to this day. When I've told this story to close friends, they tell me it's straight out of a movie, and I really can't disagree with that. This starts when I finished my first year of college in the Bay Area. I worked my rear off in school, and I just wanted to have a wild summer, and I would do anything I could to get out of the house. My cousin was, and is, my best friend, and we basically did anything and everything together. When there wasn't anything to do, we would take walks together around my rural neighborhood. I always lived near this old hospital, which used to operate as the biggest trauma unit in my area. Sometime when I was in high school, they shut the hospital down due to unknown reasons. It basically just sat there rotting for a few years before we found it. One day my cousin and I were drinking a cold one and taking one of our routine walks, and we ventured away from our usual route through this peaceful, random field. We stumbled across this huge parking lot after making it out of the field, but it didn't hit me that this was the old hospital parking lot that we'd found. We made our way through the lot until we saw this massively grand building standing outside of the lot. The deteriorated banner said emergency room, and this is when we knew we had struck gold and stumbled across a back route to this abandoned hospital. We knew of this place, but we had never been here. We hadn't heard any weird, outlandish urban legends, nor had anyone we knew been here before us. We pushed forward, and we checked the perimeter. To our surprise, the first door we walked up to had a rock jammed in between the door frames, so we could waltz in. This is when we realized that this could potentially be a bad idea if we got caught, and we could suffer some consequences. We agreed that we would be quiet and respectful and make it a quick trip. This is where things take a turn. Or a few turns. We entered the building, and it was the most deafening quiet that I have ever heard. The sound of the door closing behind us sounded like a literal bombing. Once the echo stopped from the door, it dawned on us that this place was freaking creepy. We walked slowly, but the floor was covered in glass, which made even the smallest steps sound like Bigfoot lumbering around a library. We found a patient room, which still had a bed inside. We stopped at the doorway to look inside because the floor looked sketchy. Out of nowhere, from around the corner, we hear the faintest, slow, drawn-out whistling. I've never in my life stopped what I was doing so suddenly. I just stare wide-eyed at my cousin, because even a whisper sounds like yelling in this place. We both have our feet planted to the ground, because if we moved at all, we would make ourselves known. At this point, we both assumed that there could potentially be a squatter or a guard of some sort. My cousin hand gestures to me that we have to leave, and we can't just stand there, because the whistling was obviously not going to stop at that point. We turn towards the opposite side of the corner that the whistling is at, and are tiptoeing out to a perfect science. Then, the whistling stops. We freeze, and then we hear the glass crunching from around the corner. So, we started running. Once we get to the door we came from, we realize that we didn't put a freaking rock in the door frame when we came in, and the door is completely stuck. As we're trying to get this door open, the glass crunching is now running. We hear this glass crunching until it sounds like it's dangerously close. I'm horrified. We turn around and try another door, and the noise of the glass is literally right in front of us. Yet no one is there. No one. We book it to a door that says pharmacy, and peel open the door. The pharmacy is completely empty except a single, perfectly placed and aligned landline phone plugged into the wall. The phone is off the hook and making a dial tone. The whole thing was perfectly lined up and centered with the whole room. I've never seen anything like it. The the dial tone was so loud in such an empty place. There wasn't power throughout the hospital, so how was it working? I was in shock. We left and we never went back. I'd heard of some other kids going there at night. They told me that they heard the whistling and thought someone was lurking in the shadows the whole time. It is a freaky world out there. I apologize if this becomes a lengthy story, but I would like to tell you a story of how I encountered what I can only describe as a manifestation of evil. Perhaps a demon, perhaps a rather angry spirit of less biblical form. So, this was about 7 years ago. I was living with my father in a mobile home in Palmdale, California. I've always been the kind of paranoid person. It was worse when I was a kid. That being said, I tended to get up at night to do a perimeter check and walk around the inside and outside of the house. This always goes well. I never find anything. One day, however, I got up to do my check and something was off. Something in the air, how heavy it was, how cold it was, the lack of music from across the street, the pressure. I couldn't tell what, but I knew for a fact that something was wrong. Being myself, I got up to do a check anyway. As I went from my bedroom to the kitchen, the air got colder. The feeling was not pleasant. Instead of going out the front door as normal, I continued to the dining room. I did a check of everyone's bedroom and made my way to the living room. Before the living room, there's a tiny hallway, and at the entrance to it, I stopped dead. That air started to get hot. The rest of the house was cold. As I continued down the hallway, the air got hotter and hotter, and the pressure in the air got greater. This happened every inch that I traveled until I reached the door onto the porch. Once I was there, the pressure and the temperature were at their max. I could tell that whatever was there was not normal, and not something that I should be involved with. But something was drawing me to open the door. I reached out my hand and touched the knob, and immediately was filled with the deepest rage and hatred that I have ever felt. I held on to the door handle for a few moments before realizing that I was even doing it. I let go and felt some kind of shift in pressure. Like it was agitated. It was getting hard to breathe. I spoke out loud and said, "I do not know you, and you are not welcome in this home," with as much confidence as I could find. It seemed to be enough. The presence faded away, and it got much cooler. I could hear the crickets and then the neighbors' music. Everything was normal, but I didn't go back to sleep that night. This is a story from when I was about 6 or 7. One of my old neighbors used to babysit some kids my age during the summers. Since they were about my age, and the only boys on my street, I would always go over to see them. My neighbor's house is right on the edge of a small forested area, and there are tons of trees and areas to hide in. There was also a small path cutting right through the wooded area, so sometimes people would go through my neighbor's yard to get to it. One time I was playing with my friends in my neighbor's yard when I looked over at one of the trees. I saw a dark black figure, like shadow black, standing beside the tree. The figure was pitch black. No facial features, no clothes, nothing. And he wasn't like see-through like a shadow is, it was just pitch black. He ducked behind the tree before I could get a better look. I told my mom about it, but she didn't think much of it since I was so young. A few months later, I was riding my bike past my neighbor's yard. I looked over at the trees, and sure enough, he was there. I stared at him for a moment before looking back in front of me, hit the curb, and then scraped up my knee. When I looked back, he was gone again. And this is the last story that I have about him. About a year after I first saw him, me and my sister were in the backyard playing on our playset. All of a sudden, I heard my mom yelling for me to grab my sister and come in. My sister was like 3 or 4 at the time. I grabbed her and ran back in, but just before I got inside, I glanced over at the fence, and there he was, staring at me and my sister. I asked my mom why she called us in, and she told us it was because she saw the man too, and thought he was some creep or something. She described it exactly as I had. Then I never saw him again. Nowadays, I still don't know if it was some sort of spirit, or just some type of creepy dude that I happened to see multiple times. My sister was too young to really remember him, but me and my mom still talk about it to this day. Edit. Tonight, I was talking to my mom about the Shadow Man, and she told me that one time she was pulling out of our driveway, and she saw him in our other neighbor's yard. She didn't tell me this originally, because she was afraid that it would scare me. I'm hoping this won't get too long, considering there isn't too much depth to this story. At my high school, we have an old stage and a new one. Not going to disclose the name for privacy reasons. The older one doesn't really get used as much since the construction of the new one, and is actually getting bulldozed this summer. Now, there's been rumors of both stages being haunted for as long as I've known. I know upperclassmen who swear they saw an old woman sitting up on the catwalk, but when they went to check it out, no one was there. The old stage is where my story takes place. During some free time one day, me and a few other friends went to investigate the old stage. We were messing around in the costume area, backstage, and in the sound booth. We even pulled out a cheap ghost tracker app just for fun. Keep in mind, this is during the school day, but it's almost pitch black in there. We started to leave, and the people that got to the doors first held them open for us, so that allowed a little bit of light to come in. As we were walking back up the rows of seats to leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It looked like a woman on all fours quickly crawling towards me. Now, this wasn't a normal crawl. It was practically a sprint on her hands and feet. She had dark, messy hair and ragged clothing. I quickly did a double take, and she was gone. Normally, I would say that I just got in the spirit of things and tried to convince myself that I saw something, but the way my heart jumped, I know that that can't be true. I don't know what I saw there, but it scared me more than anything else ever has. So, for context, my great-grandpa on my dad's side was a total badass. He was there at Normandy on D-Day, fought, and then his entire platoon was blown to pieces. He was dragged away to a German POW camp and pronounced dead when his dog tags were found in a puddle of blood. For a year, my great-grandmother insisted that her husband was still alive out there, and then the camp was liberated, and he went home a Purple Heart awardee. He had a big family, had a long life, and was all around a great dude. 10 years after he passed, my brother is in a Boy Scout, and my dad is the troop leader. They were working on a badge that required them to tour the local library. While on the tour, the librarian shows off the genealogy section of the library. It is massive. and it's composed of rows and rows of files in multiple metal drawers. She explains that they contain things like newspaper articles, death records, etc., from our county dating back to the 1800s. She then opens a random drawer and pulls out a random file. That has my grandpa's name on it, my brother says. On the file, it was labeled with my great-grandpa's name and a date. Shocked, the librarian opens it, and inside is the newspaper article announcing the date of when he died on D-Day, and a bit about him and my grandma. We didn't even know that that article existed before that day. Obviously, my brother and dad are thoroughly creeped out, as there was literally no way that woman could have known to pick that file. Was this just a weird coincidence? Or something else? Does anyone else find that they experienced paranormal happenings more when they were younger? I had this soldier toy holding a flag who would sing "We Will Rock You" when you pushed a button, but it stopped working for whatever reason, so I took the batteries out and saved them for another toy. Anyway, like I usually would, I packed my toys away and climbed into bed. Bunk beds were the stuff back then. I looked down at the floor. All my toys were packed away, so it was time for sleep. Usually it's very easy for me to fall asleep, but for some reason, I couldn't. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I started freaking out. I threw the covers off of me and looked down on my floor, and the soldier toy was there staring at me. I screamed for my mom, and she could see me clearly distressed as I tried to explain what happened, but she just put it down to me forgetting to put that particular toy away. There's no way that I forgot to put the toy away. I was a very tidy child. When I was about 4 or 5, I remember waking up to somebody talking to me. But, of course, nobody was there. I kept hearing a little voice that said, "Hi, hello, good morning, how are you?" I tried finding the source of the sound, and according to my memory, it was coming from a plush lobster that I put in my closet. I noticed that it was moving on its own, and I think trying to wave. Well, as nice as this little lobster was, I was terrified and ran out of my room to tell my mom. She told me the sound had to be the hamster running on the wheel. Except the hamster was all the way downstairs, and I'm pretty sure that what I heard was someone talking. The lobster wasn't mechanical in any way. It was simply a plush lobster, with a hole for puppeteering, and that was it. No voice box, no nothing. Although I did have electronic toys at the time, I am positive that none of them said anything that I heard that morning. So, that, my friends, was a collection of paranormal stories remade. That's right. All of these stories have been on this channel before, but unless you've been around since April, May of 2020, you probably haven't heard them. Though that is unless you dug back into the archives of old Raven videos, which don't do that. Anyways, my point is, these stories were some of the first ones that I did way, way back. Starting this channel in December of 2019, so April, May of 2020 was right around the corner from where I started. I think these were some of the most interesting paranormal stories I've done, especially back then. Yeah, just really good stories, really creepy paranormal stories, really interesting ones, bizarre ones, and yeah, I liked them. I enjoyed them. If I didn't, I wouldn't have done them once, much less twice, almost, no, more than 3 years later, right? So, anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. That helps tremendously. If you want me to do more of these remade stories, let me know. I have a few more planned, but if they don't, catch traction, then I'll just probably won't do them as much. Yeah. You can thumbs up, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and make sure that you don't subscribe and come around to finding me 3 years from now when I'm redoing stories that I redid that I did for the first time yesterday. What am I saying? I'm not doing very well in this outro. I'm very tired. Anyways, subscribe if you liked what you heard and want more. Leave a comment letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing, all that stuff and whatnot. You can join Patreon memberships to get early access to content like this and other stuff depending on what you sign up for and how you sign up. And yeah. Anyways, friends, I hope you know you are loved, you are important, you are valid, the best you that you can be. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until I see you again, my friends, much love and sleep well.